Hello, welcome everyone. I am Himanshi Nagpal and I work with Gcarbon Private Limited. And I will be your host for today. And today's topic is carbon accounting. So, over the next 30 to 40 minutes, I'm going to break down what's carbon accounting basically, what it is, how it works, why it matters for your business, and where India is heading on its front. I am not here to lecture you on climate change. You already know how climate change is real. And I'm here to give you a professional toolkit, basically, the language, the frameworks, the insider clarity that organizations are paying so much. They're paying enormous amount to those consultants just to understand what is carbon accounting. So, whether you're an ESG professional or you're completely new to this topic, this few minutes, these 30 to 40 minutes, no fluff, let's make every minute count and understand what's carbon accounting. So, is my screen visible to everybody? Okay. Okay. So let me start with a question. Imagine your bank sends you a statement every month and it tells you exactly how much you've spent, where you spent it, and what's left. Now imagine a world where every business got that same kind of statement, but not for money, for carbon. For every ton of carbon dioxide they emitted, where it came from, and what they owe to the planet. That is carbon accounting. And today, it's not just a moral choice, it has become a business imperative. India is the third largest emitter of carbon dioxide in the world. And yet, per capita, an average Indian emits less than one third of what an average American does. And it is less than one fourth of an average European. So we are a country that has contributed relatively less and relatively little to the historical stock of carbon in the atmosphere. And still, we are on the front line of its consequences. It can be extreme heat events, monsoons, flooding, the glacial retreat in Himalayas, etc. So many things going on. India has committed to net zero by 2070 and to generating 50% of its electricity from renewables by 2030. These are transforming how every serious Indian business is being evaluated by investors, by regulators, and by global supply chain partners. And here's the part that should make every professional or everyone in this room to pay a close attention to. That is, only 100 companies on this planet are responsible for 71% of the global emissions. Just 71%. And most of them, until recently, had no legal obligations to even count or what they were emitting. Nothing. That is about to change permanently. Because today, right now, we are in the middle of single biggest transformation in corporate accountability. That is called carbon accounting. And whether you are a student that's figuring out your career, maybe a professional who's trying to understand ESG, or a business leader wondering what is coming, by the end of the session, I promise you, you will see the world of business through a completely different lens. Okay. India. Why in India, basically? Here's the question, when did companies start doing financial accounting? Okay, so centuries ago, because government said that if you operate in our economy, you must be transparent with your money. Well, we are now equivalent moment, that is for the G carbon and the carbon reporting. So governments around the world are saying that if you operate in our economy, you must be transparent with your emissions too. Let me give you three numbers that are happening right now, and that is okay, $130 trillion. Yes, that is particularly the amount of capital that financial institutions, that is the bank, the asset manager, the pension, etc., have committed to net zero alignment. $130 trillion. That's when the capital moves, the rule follows. Okay, coming to 50,000, that is the number of companies that will be required to report a detailed carbon data under the European Union's Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, that is the CSRD, which is being phrased between 2024 to 2028. This is not a voluntary ESG survey. This is going to be mandatory. This is a law. It is going to be audited, just like your financial statements. Coming to the part three, that is the 2030, the year 2030. This is the approximate year by which, under current trajectories, we cross about 1.5 degrees Celsius of global warming. The threshold scientists have identified as a point of increasingly irreversible consequences. So we have a financial system under transformation, basically, coming to regulatory mandates that are arriving, and also physical deadline on planet stability. That's why carbon accounting is not a trend. It is not a buzzword. It's the next core competency of every serious business professional. And so is Gcarbon. And today we are going to learn this. So now let's start with the three scopes of emission, that is scope 1, direct emission, scope 2, indirect energy emissions, and scope 3, that is value chain emission. Scope 1, that is direct emission, are the emissions from sources your organization owns or controls directly. Your company's boilers, burning fuel, it can be your delivery trucks, the manufacturing furnaces, the diesel generator on your factory floor, the fugitive emissions, anything that you light, you burn, you own those emissions. That is scope 1. Think of it as what comes directly out of my chimney. Okay, that is all about scope 1. Then coming to scope 2, indirect energy emissions. These are the emissions from the electricity, heat, steam, or cooling that you purchase and consume. Okay, अभी कोई भी coal, let's say we are burning the coal at a power plant, उसको हम emissions जो हमारे scope 2 emissions है उसमें calculate नहीं करते हैं, because वो हमारा कुछ purchased energy नहीं है. But when you buy the electricity that comes from that coal, that comes under your upstream emissions and indirect energy emissions. इसको ऐसे समझते हैं कि जो emissions हमारे इलेक्ट्रिसिटी बिल पे आ रहे हैं वो those are scope 2. ठीक है. Why is it why why do we say it is most corporate climate commitment? It is because it is manageable. हम उसको रेन्यूएबल एनर्जी से स्विच कर सकते हैं, हम उसे ग्रीन पावर खरीद के स्विच कर सकते हैं, हेंस इट इज कंट्रोलेबल. तो स्कोप 2 इज वेयर मोस्ट कॉर्पोरेट क्लाइमेट कमिटमेंट्स स्टार्ट. कमिंग टू स्कोप 3, दैट इज द वैल्यू चेन एमिशन. ये सबसे बड़ा एमिशन है. आई टेल यू व्हाई. क्योंकि यहाँ पे प्रोडक्ट लाइफ, पूरी प्रोडक्ट लाइफ फ्रॉम द वेरी बिगिनिंग स्टेज, उसके बनने से उसके एंड, पूरा उसका जब डिस्पोजल हो रहा है, एग्जैक्ट दैट पॉइंट तक उसका एमिशन कितना रहा है, वो हमारा स्कोप 3 में आता है. Hence, it covers all other indirect emissions, be it upstream, downstream, across all your value chain. उसमें 15 सब कैटेगरीज होती हैं, जिसमें सप्लायर गुड, बिजनेस ट्रैवल, एम्प्लॉय कम्यूटिंग, प्रोडक्ट यूज्ड बाय कस्टमर्स एंड एंड ऑफ लाइफ डिस्पोजल इंक्लूड कर सकते हैं. फिर अभी इनका स्टैटिस्टिक्स समझते हैं, ठीक है। स्कोप 3 जो है वो हमारा अराउंड 70 to 90% ऑफ टोटल कार्बन फुटप्रिंट रिप्रेजेंट करता है। 70 to 90%, दैट्स अ ह्यूज परसेंटेज। द एमिशंस जिनको आप डायरेक्टली कंट्रोल नहीं कर रहे हो, जो आपके सप्लाई चेन में हिडन है, जो आपके कस्टमर बिहेवियर में हिडन है, दोज आर कंट्रीब्यूटिंग सो मच टू योर टोटल कार्बन फुटप्रिंट। कॉर्पोरेट सप्लाई चेन्स जो हैं वो अराउंड 5.5 टाइम्स ज्यादा एमिशन प्रोड्यूस करती हैं दैन अ कंपनी का खुद का ऑपरेशन, जो उनके डायरेक्ट ऑपरेशंस है। ओके, this is why carbon accounting is hard, and this is why it is important also. Coming to the next part, that is how the calculations work. Now, we have already understood the what part. Now let's talk about the how part. Okay, so how do you actually calculate emissions? The formula is very simple. It's like emission is the product of activity data and the emission factor. Now, what is activity data? It is basically what your organization does. आपके कंपनी में अगर इलेक्ट्रिसिटी कंज्यूम हो रहा है तो कितना किलोवाट आवर्स का इलेक्ट्रिसिटी कंज्यूम हो रहा है। अगर उसमें डी फ्लीट फ्लीट इज द व्हीकल, अगर व्हीकल चल रहा है तो उसमें कितना लीटर्स ऑफ डीजल बर्न हो रहा है। हाउ मेनी किलोमीटर्स डिड योर एम्प्लॉयज फ्लाई। ठीक है, तो ये सारा डेटा किससे आता है? ये सब आता है यूटिलिटी बिल्स, फ्यूल लॉग्स, परचेज रिकॉर्ड्स, ट्रैवल एक्सपेंस रिपोर्ट एक्सेट्रा। तो दिस इज बेसिकली ना एक्टिविटी डेटा। जो भी कोई ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में एक्टिविटी हो रही है उससे जो भी एमिशन हो रहा है, दैट इज योर एक्टिविटी डेटा। Coming to emission factors, these are the conversion coefficients. Now what is conversion coefficient? This basically means कि आपको एक specific value दी गई है to multiply with the activity data to get your total emissions. ओके, सो फॉर एन एग्जाम्पल अगर मैं बोलती हूँ कि आपके जो एमिशन फैक्टर है फॉर ग्रिड इलेक्ट्रिसिटी इंडिया में, उसकी अप्रोक्सीमेट वैल्यू है 0.82 kg कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड पर किलोवाट आवर्स। ओके, अगर हम ये लेके चलते हैं, ठीक है, तो उसके बाद अगर हमारे ऑफिस में 10,000 किलोवाट आवर कंज्यूम हुआ है, तो स्कोप 2 एमिशंस हमारे कैसे कैलकुलेट होंगे? एक्टिविटी डेटा मल्टीप्लाइड बाय द एमिशन फैक्टर, दैट इज 10,000 into 0.82, which at last gives us 8.2 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. Now this is how we calculate. Okay, emission factors are published by authoritative bodies, जैसे कि यहाँ पे मेंशन किया गया है, and it can be the IPCC, it can be the national government, it can be the IEA। ये सारे जितने भी हमारी मिनिस्ट्रीज कह लो या कह लो कि हमारे स्टैंडर्ड्स हैं फॉर एमिशन फैक्टर लाइब्रेरी, तो दैट इज वेयर यू कैन गेट योर एमिशन फैक्टर्स। एंड एमिशन फैक्टर्स जो है वो वेरी करते हैं बाय कंट्री, बाय फ्यूल टाइप्स, बाय इंडस्ट्री, बाय स्टेट्स, बाय रीजन एक्सेट्रा। अभी यहाँ पे क्या होता है ना, यहाँ पे हमारा प्राइमरी डेटा एंड सेकेंडरी डेटा वाली पूरी थ्योरी आ जाती है। प्राइमरी डेटा क्या होता है? जिसको आप डायरेक्टली मेजर करते हो, जैसे कि आपका इलेक्ट्रिसिटी मीटर का रीडिंग हो गया, आपका फ्यूल कंजम्पशन लॉग है। इनसे क्या होता है? प्राइमरी डेटा गिव्स यू हाई एक्यूरेसी, सेकेंडरी डेटा ऑन द अदर हैंड गिव्स यू लो एक्यूरेसी। क्यों? क्योंकि आपके सेकेंडरी डेटा में हम लोग एवरेजेस ज्यादा लेते हैं। क्यों लेते हैं? क्योंकि व्हेन यू डोंट हैव द एग्जैक्ट नंबर्स तो हम उनमें ना बेंचमार्क्स या एवरेजेस ज्यादा लेंगे। अगर बेंचमार्क और एवरेजेस ले रहे हो तो यू आर नॉट गेटिंग द एग्जैक्ट नंबर, हेंसफोर्थ वो एक्यूरेसी को थोड़ा सा डिक्रीज कर देता है। बट इट इज समटाइम्स नेसेसरी कि हम बेंचमार्क्स या हम एवरेजेस लेकर उन पे काम करें। दैट इज बिकॉज कि हमारा जो स्कोप 3 है उसमें बहुत सारे एमिशंस ऐसे होते हैं जिनको हम एग्जैक्ट नंबर पे कैलकुलेट नहीं कर पाते। कमिंग टू द नेक्स्ट पार्ट, Okay, how carbon accounting is done is really clear. Coming to net zero versus the carbon neutral. Now, these two terms are around the same topic, but they are not the same. Okay, they sound same. Okay, these two terms are used constantly and they are also confused constantly. Carbon neutral basically means that an organization offsets its current emission typically by buying or purchasing the carbon credits. लेट्स से आपकी कंपनी ने 100 टन्स ऑफ कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड एमिट किया, आपने उसको न्यूट्रल करने के लिए 100 टन ऑफ कार्बन क्रेडिट्स खरीद लिए। आपने उसमें कोई भी रिडक्शन नहीं किया, आपने अपने एमिशंस कम नहीं किया, आपने क्या किया, इतना एमिट हुआ है मैं इतने कार्बन क्रेडिट्स खरीद लेता हूँ। तो पेपर पे तो नेट रिजल्ट जीरो दिखा रहा है, बट द प्रॉब्लम इज कि कार्बन न्यूट्रलिटी डजंट रिक्वायर यू टू रिड्यूस योर एमिशंस। क्रिटिक्स है बेसिकली। ओके, एंड इट इज इंक्रीजिंगली वेरी डिस्टर्बिंग। रेगुलेटर्स जो है इसको कार्बन ऑफसेटिंग विदाउट डीकार्बनाइजेशन भी बोलते हैं। कमिंग टू नेट जीरो, इट इज अ फंडामेंटली डिफरेंट कमिटमेंट। उसमें क्या होता है कि फर्स्टली यू रिड्यूस योर एमिशंस एज डीपली एज पॉसिबल। सारे स्कोप्स में आप जितना एमिशन रिड्यूस कर सकते हो आप करोगे। उसके बाद इन लाइन विद द 1.5 डिग्री सेल्सियस पाथवे, वो क्या करेगा, हमारा उसके बाद जितने भी रेजिडुअल एमिशंस बच रहे हैं, मतलब एक सर्टेन अमाउंट जितना हम रिडक्शन कर सकते थे एमिशन का, हमने किया। अगर उसके बाद भी कुछ एमिशंस बच रहे हैं तो हम उनको हाई क्वालिटी ऑफसेट्स के साथ रिप्लेस करते हैं। दैट इज, अगर लेट्स से हमारे पास X+5 एमिशंस थे, तो हमने ट्राई किया कि हम X+3 तक आए। दैट इज, हमने -2 कर दिया, जो -2 है दैट इज आर एमिशन जो हमने रिड्यूस किया। तो जो X+3 हमारे पास बच रहा है, उसके लिए जो +3 है हमें उसके लिए कार्बन क्रेडिट्स खरीदने हैं। बट व्हेन, जब हमने ऑलरेडी ट्राई कर लिया है टू रिड्यूस आर एमिशंस फ्रॉम ऑल द स्कोप्स। इज दिस पॉइंट क्लियर? ओके, moving further, let's take a real world example. Okay, so Maersk is a company that is responsible for transporting 20% of the global container goods. It is committed to net zero by 2040, so 10 years ahead of the Paris Agreement timeline. So, Paris Agreement timeline is basically the 2030, but this particular organization also is committing to net zero, but by 2040. At least they are committing to it first. But how are they committing to it? That is because their carbon accounting revealed that approximately 99% of their emissions came from the fuel combustion in their fleet. So they came up with a solution that was, let's transition, let's change, let's switch to green methanol and ammonia powered vessels. They've already launched the world's first commercially operated methanol powered vessel, that was launched in 2023. And this has religiously changed the approach basically. So the carbon accounting exercise gave them the data to make the strategic commitment. And that's the power of discipline. Okay, a few Indian examples are the textile manufacturer, which came up with the discovery that their raw cotton procurement was one of the major, had the major contribution to their total footprint. That was 40% of their total footprint. Hence, they thought of, or they decided to switch to a certified sustainable cotton, which afterwards reduced their carbon footprint as well as the procurement risk. And the next point is the IT services company, that is the Bengaluru IT services. This company came to know that their employee commuting, that is the scope 3 category 7 emission, was the most contributing element to their inventories. Hence, they decided to introduce a hybrid work policy and shuttle services. Okay, so that cut off the commute related emissions by 30%. Next point is the consumer good exporter. A consumer good exporter was seeking to list on a European stock exchange, and they were asked to provide their verified carbon footprint, which they could not. And because they could not present their carbon accounting in place, they would have lost their access to that capital. Coming to infrastructure company, a carbon accounting exercise uncovered energy waste in cement production. अभी इससे क्या हो रहा है? It is leading to saving of 12% energy. The carbon accounting exercise didn't just measure the problem, it revealed the investment case as well. Okay, coming to the tools and softwares, um, doing this manually in Excel, doing the full accounting part in Excel is possible but very complex. Okay, so we need dedicated tools for that. In India, there are many platforms that are emerging related to carbon accounting. So we'll go through a few of them. That is Carbon Wise, which is for scope 3 and supply chain. Coming to Zero Carbon, which was tailored for the BRSR. Um, Carbon Niti, which was SME focused. Green Ledger was for ESG and carbon platforms. Then the Hertz Wave was for the ESG integration. Okay. फिर है ग्लोबली अगर हम देखें तो ग्लोबली एंटरप्राइज जैसे कि वाटरशेड है, परसिफनी है, सेल्सफोर्स नेट जीरो क्लाउड, माइक्रोसॉफ्ट सस्टेनेबिलिटी मैनेजर एंड सैप सस्टेनेबिलिटी, ये क्या कर रहे हैं? दे आर टेकिंग अ स्टेप फॉरवर्ड टू ERP integration, automated data extraction, and real-time dashboards. ये काम जो consultants around months में करते थे, they are doing it within weeks, hours, and minutes. Coming to, I'll mention a few free AI assisted carbon calculators, which are very easy to use and henceforth help your organization to calculate your GHG emissions. That is carbonfootprint.com, which is a free calculator for businesses and individuals that cover travel, energy, and food, etc. Generates report with offset suggestions. Then there's GHG protocol free tools. That is an Excel based calculator, industry specific versions, the global gold standard used by thousands of companies. Then there's SME Climate Hub calculator, which is one of the best for the small businesses. It is AI guided, it has questionnaire format, etc. Then there are few more, I'll just name them. That is Normative, Plan A, My Climate, Google Environmental Insights Explorer, Climate Q&A, which is an open source AI chatbot trained on the IPCC climate reports, which helps you understand the carbon related questions. Then we have what goes wrong. Okay, so what are the challenges and what are the common mistakes in carbon accounting? So the mistake number one is the data quality theater. Companies spend enormous effort building beautiful sustainability reports full of graphics, full of commitments. बट होता क्या है उसमें उसमें होता है एस्टिमेटेड डेटा होता है, ब्रोकन डेटा होता है, पैची डेटा होता है, विच इज नॉट ऑफ एज मच यूज जो हमें चाहिए. ओके अगर आपका एमिशन फैक्टर ही प्रॉपर नहीं है, अगर वो बहुत साल पुराना है, या उसको बोलें कि वो एक्सपायरी है, तो हम उसको यूज करके उससे अपने एमिशंस निकाल के अगर प्रेजेंट करते हैं तो इट इज ऑफ नो यूज, इट हैज नो मीनिंग. ओके योर कार्बन इन्वेंट्री इज लाइक अ फिक्शन बेसिकली, अगर सब कुछ गलत गलत चल रहा है तो. A carbon accounting, a credible carbon accounting starts with credible data governance. Okay, so mistake number two here can be the ignoring of scope 3 because it is too hard. Okay, now if a company, let's say company X, is doing the scope 1 and 2 emission reports and not doing the scope 3, you are not doing carbon accounting. It's just a carbon theater. Why? Because scope 3 जो है वो complex है, but वो 80% of emissions ले रहा है. Around 70 to 90% of total emissions is carried out by the scope 3. If you are not adhering to them, then it is of no use basically. Then treating carbon credits as a strategy. Carbon credits as a strategy because offsets जो होते हैं ना, they have a role. They are not just कि हमने एक reduction की जगह पे substitute रख दिया. It is not like that. It is कि यार अगर हमारी कंपनी जो है दैट रिलाई हेविली ऑन ऑफसेट्स विदाउट अ क्रेडिबल रिडक्शन रोड मैप, तो वो एक बहुत रेपुटेशनल रिस्क पे पहुंच सकती है. उसको बहुत ज्यादा रेपुटेशनल रिस्क हो सकता है इन फ्यूचर. व्हाई? बिकॉज आप डिकार्बोनाइजेशन में हेल्प नहीं कर रहे हो. आप क्या कर रहे हो? आपके पास एमिशंस बढ़े, आपने उतने क्रेडिट्स खरीद लिए. Coming back to the point, pointing out the topic of carbon neutrality and net zero. The fourth mistake or something that goes wrong is one and done annual reporting. अगर कोई भी चीज को अराउंड अ ईयर किया जाए, एनुअली किया जाए, तो उससे हमारी जो एक्यूरेसी है, उससे जो हमारी रिलायबिलिटी ऑन द डेटा, करेक्शन ऑफ द डेटा कि कितना करेक्ट है, वो सब कुछ कम हो जाता है. बट एक चीज है कि अगर हम उसको एनुअली ना करके अगर हम उसको मंथली ट्रैकिंग करें, वेरिएंस एनालिसिस करें एंड बोर्ड लेवल विजिबिलिटी लेकर आए, तो उससे हमारा वर्ल्ड चेंज हो सकता है. कमिंग टू गुड न्यूज दैट इज कि हम कहीं पे तो स्टार्ट कर सकते हैं एटलीस्ट. इफ अंटिल नाउ हमारी कंपनी सिर्फ कार्बन न्यूट्रलिटी पे चल रही थी, तो वी कैन सिंपली शिफ्ट टुवर्ड्स at least moving further with the net zero compliance. At least start with it. So as your data quality improves, आपकी reporting quality भी improve होती है. The moment you measure, report and reduce, it leads to a good quality. It leads to a good reporting quality. And then repeating the whole process again. Okay, coming to the next part, the next 5 years in carbon accounting. What is going on here? Simple is mandatory reporting. Okay, now what is mandatory reporting basically? That this is not a law. Okay, this is something that every company must be doing. All right. So EU, that is the European Union's CSRD, is already a law. Okay, climate disclosure rules are already there. The era of voluntary sustainability reporting is ending. Why? Because compliance is no longer optional. Coming to the part AI and automation. What does this AI and automation relate here in carbon accounting? Platforms that are integrating with ERP systems to automate data extraction, which is reducing the manual efforts by 60 to 80%. AI is making real time carbon monitoring a reality. Annual reporting is evolving into continuous intelligence. Coming to digital product passports, the European Union is mandating that every product carry a verified carbon footprint. उसकी पूरी लाइफ जर्नी में every product must have a good footprint, like everything should be verified. The trend 4 is the carbon pricing expansion. That is, today, roughly around 23% of global emissions are covered by carbon pricing mechanism, and CBAM is already live. So the carbon market is increasingly a financial market. It is not just environmental market, it is also becoming a financial market. The trend 5 is the ISSB global standards, which is working on harmonized global sustainability disclosure standards. इनका direction बहुत clear है. That is, carbon accounting is moving from voluntary to mandatory. Okay, optional disclosures को financial reporting, verified financial reporting में चेंज कर दिया गया है. लाइक ऑडिटेड अकाउंट्स, जैसे फाइनेंशियल ऑडिटिंग होती है वैसे ही अब हमारी कार्बन ऑडिटिंग भी होगी. Okay, so this is becoming as fundamental to businesses as accounting was. Okay, so coming to the next part, carbon accounting is the new double entry bookkeeping. Okay, so in the 15th century, the invention of double entry bookkeeping transformed the commerce. Okay, for the very first time, businesses could truly understand their financial position, not just their revenues, उनकी liabilities, their assets, उनका actual net worth कितना है. उससे क्या हुआ? उससे उनकी accountability create हुई. इससे उनकी investments enable हुई, and this made modern capitalism possible. ठीक है, we are at the same inflection point for carbon. Carbon accounting is the new double entry bookkeeping. It gives you organizations for the very first time a true picture कि उनका environmental position क्या है, where they stand. Not just उनको क्या earn हो रहा है या वो कहाँ spend कर रहे हैं, but also कि what they take and give back to the planet. The companies that master this now have built an internal system. उन्होंने अपना ऐसा डेवलप कर लिया है टैलेंट, उसको कार्बन इंटेलिजेंस को अपनी स्ट्रैटेजीज में एम्बेडेड कर लिया है. Those companies will lead the next era of businesses. We are basically in the decade of accountability. It is not just financial accountability, but also environmental accountability. उससे क्या होगा? जो हमारा कार्बन अकाउंटिंग है, दैट इज गोइंग टू बी द मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट एंड जो सबसे ज्यादा मैनेजेबल थिंग होगी. व्हाई? बिकॉज मैनेजिंग एंड offsetting the carbon emissions is important and is at a certain level easy. Why? Because we just have to limit the emissions. Okay, so carbon accounting is the foundation of that understanding. And with this, we come to an end to our PPT. Thank you so much for attending this webinar. And if you'd like to explore how carbon accounting works and how it can work for your organization specifically, we, Gcarbon, and our team would love to connect and help you out. Thank you so much.